You measured your blood pressure this morning, the way you always do. Maybe in the same chair you've used for years. You wrote down the number, maybe felt a flash of worry or relief depending on what it said. But here's something almost nobody tells you. The way you were sitting, where your arm was resting, even whether you talked while the cuff was inflating, could have changed that number by 10, 20, even 30 points. The reading you're trusting to manage your own health might not be measuring your blood pressure at all. It might be measuring a mistake. I want to be clear about why this matters so much before we even start. For millions of people, that number on the screen is the single piece of data deciding whether a medication gets adjusted, whether a doctor gets called, whether a person spends the rest of their day quietly worried or genuinely relieved, or whether a follow-up test gets ordered at all. If that number is wrong because of something as fixable as how you were sitting, that's not a small technical detail. That's a real problem worth fixing today. I'm with Your Health, and today I'm walking you through 11 specific mistakes that quietly distort blood pressure readings taken at home. Every single one backed by research from the American Heart Association and major medical centers like Johns Hopkins. By the end, you'll know exactly how to get a number you can actually trust the very next time you sit down to check. Drop your age in the comments right now and tell me, do you check your blood pressure at home? And if so, where do you usually sit when you do it? I read every comment, and your answer helps me understand who's watching today, and might even help you notice your own routine a little more clearly before we even get into the list. Let's start with mistake number 1. And it's probably the single most common one researchers have identified: letting your arm hang unsupported at your side while you take the reading. A study out of Johns Hopkins Medicine, recruiting over 130 adults, found that an unsupported arm hanging at the side overestimated systolic blood pressure, that's the top number, by 6.5 points, and the diastolic number by 4.4 points, compared to the recommended standard of resting your arm on a desk or table. The reason this happens comes down to simple physics, not anything mysterious about your body. When your arm hangs below the level of your heart, gravity makes your heart work harder to push blood upward against that extra vertical distance. The cuff picks up that extra effort and reports it as higher pressure, even though your actual baseline blood pressure hasn't changed at all. Researchers found this pattern held true across younger and older adults, people with and without obesity, and people already diagnosed with high blood pressure, which tells you this isn't a quirk specific to any one group. It's a basic mechanical issue that affects almost everyone the same way. Here's why that number matters more than it sounds like it should. Researchers running that study pointed out that an overestimate of 6.5 points can be the exact difference between a systolic reading of 123, which falls in the elevated category, and 130, which crosses into stage 1 hypertension. Same person, same actual blood pressure, completely different diagnosis, based entirely on where your arm happened to be resting. Mistake number 2. Resting your arm in your lap instead of on a table. This feels like a reasonable middle ground between hanging your arm and properly supporting it. But the same Johns Hopkins study found it still overestimates your systolic number by 3.9 points and your diastolic number by 4.0 points. The correct position has your arm supported on a flat surface, with the middle of the cuff sitting at roughly the same height as your heart. It's worth noting why your lap doesn't fully solve the problem, even though it intuitively feels like it should. When your arm rests in your lap, it's still typically lower than true heart level, and your own muscles are doing a small but real amount of work just to hold the position steady, even while seated. Desk height support eliminates both of these issues at once. The cuff sits at the right vertical height, and your arm muscles can fully relax instead of quietly contracting to hold their position. Mistake number 3. Crossing your legs while you take the reading. According to the American Heart Association, citing data from the American College of Cardiology, crossed legs can raise your reading by up to 15 points in some cases. Although, I want to be fair to the research here. A separate review of the evidence found that in healthy people specifically, the actual effect was often much smaller, sometimes only a couple of points, and not always large enough to matter clinically. This is a good example of something worth understanding about research in general. Not every study on the same topic lands on exactly the same number, and that's not a sign anyone is lying or doing bad science. Different study populations, different measurement methods, and different starting blood pressure levels can all shift the results somewhat. People who already have high blood pressure seem to show a bigger jump from crossed legs than people with completely normal pressure to begin with. The safest approach is simple either way. Keep your feet flat on the floor and your legs uncrossed, since there's no situation where doing this makes your reading less accurate. Mistake number 4. Not having back support while you're seated. Sitting on the edge of a couch, a stool, or anywhere without something solid behind your back can raise your reading by about 5 points, according to the American Heart Association. The reason traces back to muscle engagement again. Without back support, your core and back muscles have to work continuously just to keep you upright and balanced. And that ongoing low-level effort registers in your blood pressure, even though it has nothing to do with your cardiovascular health itself. It's a small number on its own, but it adds up when combined with other mistakes on this list, which is exactly how people end up with readings that are 15 or 20 points off from reality without any single dramatic error to blame. A proper dining chair, or any chair with a solid back you can lean into fully, solves this completely, and it's worth choosing that specific spot in your home as your designated blood pressure chair, rather than measuring wherever happens to be convenient in the moment. Mistake number 5, and this one surprises almost everyone: talking during the measurement. The American Heart Association has cited research showing that engaging in conversation, even just actively listening to someone else talk, can add up to 10 points to your reading. According to the American College of Cardiology, talking specifically can push the number up by as much as 19 points. Think about how often this actually happens in real life. A spouse asks how you slept while the cuff is inflating. A grandchild walks in and asks a question. The phone rings and you answer it without thinking, mid-measurement. None of these moments feel like they should matter, which is exactly why this mistake is so common and so easy to overlook. Your brain doesn't distinguish much between the mental effort of casual conversation and other forms of low-level stress, and your blood pressure responds accordingly, in real time, even during what feels like a completely relaxed chat. If someone is in the room with you while you measure, the kindest thing they can do is stay quiet for those 60 seconds. Mistake number 6. Measuring with a full bladder. This sounds almost too simple to be real, but the American Heart Association specifically flags it, noting that a full bladder can increase your systolic reading by up to 33 points. That's one of the largest single factors on this entire list, and it's also one of the easiest to fix. The mechanism here actually makes intuitive sense once you think about it. A full bladder activates your sympathetic nervous system, the same system responsible for your body's stress and alertness responses, which in turn raises blood pressure as a side effect, completely independent of your cardiovascular health. It's not your heart or your arteries causing that elevated number in this case. It's simply your body responding to bladder fullness the way it's biologically wired to. Use the bathroom before you sit down to measure, every single time. Mistake number 7. Putting the cuff over your clothing instead of on bare skin. Depending on how thick your sleeve is, the American Heart Association notes that measuring over clothing can add up to 50 points to your reading. That's not a typo. 50 points is enough to turn a completely normal reading into something that looks like a medical emergency. Think about what that actually means in practice. Someone wearing a thick wool sweater in winter, trying to save time by just pushing the sleeve up rather than removing it entirely, could see a reading 30, 40, even 50 points higher than their real number, simply from fabric compressing unevenly under the cuff and interfering with how the sensor reads the pulse. This is one of the easiest mistakes on this entire list to fix completely, and also one of the easiest to make without ever realizing it, especially during colder months when bulky sleeves are the norm. Roll up your sleeve, or better yet, wear short sleeves on days you plan to check your pressure. Mistake number 8. Using the wrong cuff size for your arm. A cuff that's too small for your arm squeezes harder than it should to register the same pressure. And the American Heart Association notes this can add anywhere from 2 to 10 points to your reading. Other research has found the effect can be even larger, depending on exactly how mismatched the size is, with some sources citing differences as large as 30 points for a significantly mismatched cuff. The opposite mistake matters too, though it's less commonly discussed. A cuff that's too large for a smaller arm can underestimate your reading, potentially giving a false sense of reassurance when your actual pressure is higher than the number suggests. This direction of error is arguably more concerning than reading too high, since it can mean a genuinely elevated blood pressure goes unnoticed and untreated for longer than it should. Most home monitors come with a standard adult cuff, but if your arm is notably larger or smaller than average, it's worth checking the package or asking your pharmacist about a properly sized replacement. Mistake number 9: skipping the rest period before you measure. Medical guidelines call for sitting quietly for about 5 minutes before taking a reading, specifically to let your body settle after walking around, climbing stairs, or just generally moving through your day. The American Medical Association specifically flags skipping this rest period as one of the most common errors people make, right alongside talking during the measurement and using the wrong cuff size. 5 minutes feels surprisingly long when you're sitting there waiting, which is exactly why most people skip or shorten it without thinking twice. They walk in from outside, sit down, and take their reading within 10 or 15 seconds, while their heart rate and blood pressure are still elevated from the simple act of moving through the house or climbing the stairs to the bedroom. That elevated transitional state isn't your real resting blood pressure. It's a snapshot of your body still settling down from whatever you were just doing, which is precisely why the 5-minute window exists in every major set of medical guidelines on this topic. Mistake number 10: taking only one reading and trusting it completely. Even with everything done correctly, blood pressure naturally fluctuates from one moment to the next. Medical guidelines consistently recommend taking 2 or 3 readings, a minute or so apart, and looking at the average rather than treating any single number as the definitive truth. There's a specific reason the first reading in any sequence tends to run a bit higher. Simply putting on the cuff and starting the device involves a small amount of anticipatory tension, even when you think you're completely relaxed. Your body doesn't always know the difference between "I'm about to find out an important number" and ordinary mild stress, and the first reading often reflects a touch of that anticipation. By the second or third reading, that effect has usually faded, giving you a number that better reflects your actual resting state. One unusually high or low reading, taken in isolation, can lead you to a conclusion that several readings together would have corrected. Mistake number 11: never comparing your home monitor to a clinical reading at all. Home blood pressure monitors can drift out of calibration over time, and you have no way of knowing this is happening just by looking at the device. There's no warning light, no error message, nothing that tells you your trusted monitor has quietly started reading a few points high or low after months or years of regular use. The American Heart Association recommends bringing your home monitor with you to a doctor's appointment at least once, so your provider can compare it directly against a clinical device and confirm your home numbers are actually trustworthy. This takes literally just a few extra minutes of an appointment you're already having, and it's one of the only ways to catch a slowly drifting device before it leads you, or your doctor, to the wrong conclusion for months at a time. Now, here's why all 11 of these matter together, not just individually, rather than as a list of isolated technicalities. A consensus document published in the Journal of Hypertension found that a measurement error of just 5 points is enough to misclassify 84 million people worldwide into the wrong blood pressure category. 84 million people. Not from one dramatic error, but from a margin smaller than almost every single mistake we just covered. Look back at the numbers we just went through. Several of these mistakes, on their own, are larger than 5 points. Stack 2 or 3 of them together, talking while measuring, with an unsupported arm, after skipping your rest period, and you can easily land 20 or 30 points away from your actual number. That's not a small rounding error anymore. That's the difference between a doctor adding a new medication and a doctor telling you everything looks fine, based on the exact same person's actual underlying blood pressure. just measured two completely different ways. I want to be honest about something, because I promised you the real research, not a scare tactic. None of this means home blood pressure monitoring is unreliable or not worth doing. Quite the opposite. Home monitoring, done correctly, gives your doctor valuable information that a single reading at a rushed appointment simply can't capture. In fact, many doctors specifically prefer home readings over office readings for exactly this reason. A doctor's office is, for a lot of people, an inherently slightly stressful environment, which can itself temporarily elevate blood pressure, in a phenomenon often called white coat syndrome. A series of readings taken comfortably at home, done correctly, often paints a more accurate long-term picture than any single number captured during a brief, somewhat nerve-wracking office visit. The goal of this video isn't to make you distrust your monitor. It's to make sure the number you're trusting actually reflects what's really happening in your body. Let me bring this together with someone I'll describe simply, without using a name, because the pattern shows up again and again. A woman in her late 60s had been checking her blood pressure every morning for years, sitting on the edge of her bed, legs dangling, arm resting loosely in her lap, while she chatted with her husband about the day ahead. It was a comfortable little routine, the kind of small morning ritual that feels harmless precisely because it's so familiar. Her readings had crept up gradually over a couple of years, consistently sitting in a range that worried her enough to mention it at her next appointment. She'd started quietly dreading the morning check, watching the number climb a little higher most weeks, wondering what was going wrong inside her body to cause it. When her doctor watched her demonstrate her usual routine, the problem became obvious almost immediately. Unsupported arm, legs not flat on the floor, talking the entire time. 3 separate mistakes from our list today, stacked on top of each other every single morning for years. Her doctor didn't scold her or make her feel foolish about it. The doctor simply smiled and said this exact pattern comes up more often than most patients would ever guess, and walked her through the correct setup. Feet flat, back supported, arm resting on a table at heart height. Complete silence for the full measurement. The very next morning, using the exact same monitor she'd owned for years, her reading came in meaningfully lower than her recent average. Nothing about her actual blood pressure had changed overnight. What changed was that she was finally measuring it correctly. I want to speak to you directly for a moment. If you recognized 2, 3, or even more of these mistakes in your own daily routine, I don't want you to panic about every reading you've taken over the past several years. I don't want you lying awake tonight mentally recalculating months of numbers in your head. I want you to feel motivated to fix your setup starting with your very next measurement, and to mention this to your doctor at your next visit, especially if your readings have seemed unusually high or inconsistent lately. There's a real difference between I've been doing this wrong and now I'm worried about everything, and I've been doing this wrong and now I know exactly how to fix it. This video is firmly aimed at giving you the second feeling, not the first. Every single mistake on this list has a simple, completely free correction, something you can put into practice starting with your very next reading. None of them require a new device, a prescription, or a complicated lifestyle change. Just a few small adjustments to something you're probably already doing most mornings anyway. So here's what I'd like you to do this week. Before your next reading, walk through this short checklist. Empty bladder, 5 minutes of quiet rest, back supported, feet flat on the floor, arm resting on a table at heart level, bare skin under the cuff, correct cuff size, and complete silence for the full measurement. Take 2 readings a minute apart and look at the average, not just the first number you see. Consider writing this checklist down somewhere you'll actually see it, taped to the inside of your monitor's storage box, or saved as a note on your phone, until the full sequence becomes automatic. Most people who go through this list a handful of times find that within a week or 2, it stops feeling like a checklist at all, and simply becomes how they take their blood pressure. The same way buckling a seatbelt eventually becomes automatic, rather than a conscious list of steps you have to remember in order. Now I want to hear from you. How many of these 11 mistakes were you making without realizing it? Tell me in the comments, and tell me your age. Someone reading through these comments tomorrow, maybe sitting exactly where that woman used to sit on the edge of her bed, might need to see your honest answer and might walk away tomorrow morning measuring their pressure completely differently because of it. And if this video changed how you think about your own readings, there's a related topic I think you'll want to see next, about a handful of medications that can quietly raise blood pressure as a side effect, often without anyone connecting the two, including some you might be to find sitting in your own medicine cabinet right now. I'll break that down for you in the next video. I'll see you there.